Because what we're seeing more and more when there's weakness in the government's case is that they are going to not focus on your self-defense act, what you did in that moment, what was reasonable, what was immediately necessary. They are going to go after you for being, in their mind, a bad human being. We are the Armed Attorneys. Today, we're here to provide an update on Arizona rancher George Allen Kelly, who's facing a murder trial for defending himself against illegal immigrants on his property. We're going to talk about why his case is back in the news, what's going on with it right now. Then, we're going to talk a little bit more generally about self-defense cases, why these cases tend to go to trial. We're going to talk about why sometimes it's better not to have one story, to have two stories instead of one. And we're going to talk generally with the migrant crisis we're having in the country right now and with some high-profile incidents in New York and Georgia, how you can defend yourself against attacking illegal immigrants. But before we get started, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting the like button.
As a little bit of a background, talking about George Allen Kelly, he's an Arizona rancher who found himself charged with murder after he was out on his property, saw a group of people. There's kind of this weird, kind of quasi, not me, but self defense claim. Said he shot a warning shot. He called his kind of liaison for Border Patrol. They went out on the property, didn't see any issues. But later in the evening, he was checking on his livestock, found a dead guy on his property. Again, we have to kind of read between the lines because the way this was reported, he was in kind of military gear-ish, combat boots, looked well equipped, had a walkie-talkie. He got back in touch with Border Patrol. Border Patrol comes out. Local law enforcement comes out. They don't do much of an investigation and arrest him for murder. Now,
Also, let's add,
yeah,
he is 75 years old at the time.
yep,
And the state itself has confirmed that there were at least 8 people on the property. Mr. Kelly says they had guns. Of course, no one's there except for the deceased, who does not have any weapons on him. So
right.
that's where we're at.
Yeah, and so why is this back up in the news? Well, he has been offered a plea deal. If you're 76 years old, what is that very reasonable plea deal?
Mr. Kelly has been offered the highly reasonable plea bargain of 8 years in prison. 8 years. And
So a death penalty.
it's a death sentence, yes. And so, I mean, I'm certain in the mind of the government, they're like, "Pff, well, you could get life in prison for this. So 8 years is very reasonable." But it's not, right? I mean, we're talking about self-defense, a one-time, like, this is not someone who is a danger to the community moving forward. He has a colorable self-defense argument. 8 years is the kind of thing that, like, if I'm the lawyer, I mean, I have to turn over my license if I plea a client to 8 years on those facts.
Yeah, but we got to talk about why so many self-defense cases go to trial and why it's not always beneficial to have just one story, kind of like what we see here in the George Allen Kelly case.
These are all or nothing, all or nothing. So, I mean, it's not a scenario of like, okay, well, I know that I had the marijuana, but there's a couple other people in the car, and so maybe at trial I can make the jury think that it belonged to someone else, but my risk is high, so let's talk about punishment. This is, I did it.
Yeah.
I did it, but I did it for a reason that alleviates my criminal responsibility. So it is all or nothing. You don't want to sit there, and I have zero self-defense clients who are like, yeah, if they offer me 6 years, I'll take it, because you're like, I didn't do anything wrong. I defended my life. I defended my rights. And quite frankly, this 8-year offer, although ridiculous in the scenario, like, I've never had the state of Texas offer me 8 years on any of my self-defense clients.
No,
They're
they're all
offering me
30
like
plus.
20, 30,
Yeah.
35. I mean, it is a proposition under which the government says you are a murderer. We are prosecuting you because we don't believe your self-defense claim. You're a murderer, and you are saying, absolutely not. I did nothing wrong. It's black or white. There's nothing in between. We do not plead these cases out, just generally speaking.
Yeah, because, when you think about a criminal prosecution, the state has to prove certain things beyond reasonable doubt. We call these elements of a criminal offense. It involves the mental component, the physical component, and then some, the language that makes this a crime. And so, essentially when you're saying, hey, I acted in self-defense, boom, you've checked off all of the elements in the state's
Mhm.
case. And so now it kind of shifts over to the self-defender. In most instances, they have to prove that what they did was reasonable and immediately necessary and in response to an unlawful threat. And how bad was that unlawful threat? What amount of force was our defender justified in using? And so that's really what we're talking about here. And, states have presumptions of reasonableness. And I think this kind of ties into this wider and broader discussion we have about the illegal alien crisis at the border and how in danger people are, because these are not Girl Scouts.
These are not Girl Scouts. Okay, Richard, you said something interesting before, which is why sometimes 2 stories are not better than 1 story. Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah, so because all right, so we have, reportedly there was a bunch of folks on scene when this happened.
Everyone skedaddled.
We're never gonna find those people.
No, although the government actually did find some because they tacked on some ag assault charges, but for the most part, they've right. They weren't there when police arrived. They
Right.
weren't there when Border Patrol arrived. They have skedaddled, and the government has somehow drummed up a couple.
Yeah, but we've all heard that saying, one story is better than 2, right? Especially when it comes to self-defense cases. And in some instances, I mean, that's the truth. Because how are they going to disprove something? It's pretty difficult, right? You have to get inside of the mind of another person to figure out what all these things are going on. But in this case, so we have one story. It seems like it's not necessarily playing to his advantage.
No, because what we're seeing more and more when there's weakness in the government's case is that they are going to not focus on your self-defense act, what you did in that moment, what was reasonable, what was immediately necessary. They are going to go after you for being, in their mind, a bad human being. So we saw it in the Daniel Perry case.
Yep.
We saw it in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. So what the government in Arizona has done here is dump his phone. Dump his phone, right?
Yep.
We
And
all-
you've had cases where that's the reason they're prosecuting him as well.
Oh, yes.
That's going to trial soon.
Yes, in fact. So, I mean, we have text messages that Mr. Kelly has sent to his friends, to family, that basically, are disparaging of migrants crossing his property, things that are maybe in preparation for, like he's anticipating that he could have to shoot someone.
Yeah, so I think the moral of the story, when there is one story, the government is going to try to fill in we call them scene missings.
Mhm.
The government's got to go try to fill in the scene missings. And they do that by all kinds of things. They go dump your social media, they go dump your cell phone, they go maybe they see your cell phone logs and where you've been throughout the day, things they're trying to poke holes in your story effectively.
Right. So, when there is a dearth of evidence, they will fill it in with things that don't necessarily matter, but are inflammatory to the jury. And that's what we're going to see here in this trial. The trial is taking place in just a couple weeks now. And we are going to see, a la Sergeant Daniel Perry in the state of Texas, right? We're going to see the government saying, see, he's just a bad guy. He just wanted to shoot someone. He just hates Mexicans. He just hates migrants. He just wanted to be able to take this action. Not, he was really scared. He had to do what he had to do.
And you're all probably thinking what I'm thinking. That seems extremely unfair. It seems completely irrelevant to whether he acted in self-defense.
Mhm.
But the government has all these exceptions to otherwise inadmissible evidence, to show lack of mistake or, the identity of the actors involved or, so I don't think that one's necessarily involved, but lack of mistake that he was
Mhm.
acting, maliciously. So they might actually get all that stuff in at trial.
Right. And it just depends on, and I know everyone's like, well, a good lawyer wouldn't let that in. The quality of the lawyering has like this much to do.
Is that 2%? I'm trying
That's
to
like, yeah, with
okay.
like the whole circle of what's happening. And most of that circle is the political landscape, the media
The
attention,
judge.
just the personality of the judge, right?
mean,
Because
I think
that like no defense attorney's like, sure,
well, we have some
that can come in. No
we
one's agreeing to that. They're all fighting,
well, we
right?
have a half dozen of high-profile examples. You see how judges railroad people?
Mm-hmm.
We got a lot of that
Mhm.
going on right now. I mean, that's how
Mhm.
much power judges have over these cases. Are you trying to wink? Are you doing the Lucille Bluth?
They haven't yet. And frankly, it's a very difficult charge to prove.
Man, that jury's gonna fall in love with you.
Don't ever do that on. But It begs one of the other questions that we kind of talked about in the intro is, what are your self-defense rights when it comes to, illegal aliens? Do your self-defense rights change?
Right. So, and I know that we have a lot of high profile examples right now. We have those guys in New York who
Yep.
beat up the cop and then were really, really terrible, like flipping the bird to the media when they got released
I think
from
they've been rearrested like 3 times.
typical. Yes. Okay. I mean, just when people are so flagrant about it, like if I got arrested, I would be so humiliated and so horrified. Like flipping the bird to a camera would be just the last thing on my mind. So, yes, typical. Okay. So we've got that incident. We've got a college student in Georgia who was just murdered by someone who is not here legally. And that is bringing up in the minds of a lot of people with our growing border crisis. What if I have to defend myself against these people who, they're not here with good intentions, they're not here legally? It's scary and it comes up for people. And I will tell you that even though we have, people in the country whose criminal histories we don't know, who, we have to defend against potentially, your rights do not change. You still have the same self-defense rights you would have against Richard, against anyone else.
Yeah, so all the still same qualities apply. Reasonable, immediately necessary in response
Mhm.
to unlawful force or deadly force, depending on what the level of threat is. So the short answer is your self-defense rights don't change. But I think that a lot of folks just generally have, that awareness that, hey, look, maybe these aren't the best actors that we're dealing with. I mean, we have lots of countries just emptying their jails and sending their people to America right now. So,
Right. So, I mean, and bear in mind, that can go to your reasonableness.
yep.
Let's say you live in a border state, you've got that ranch, you know that there is cartel activity on your property. That certainly goes into your level of reasonableness if you have to use force or deadly force in defense, you
Yeah,
know,
that's a fantastic point.
yeah. But bear in mind that other than playing into reasonableness, I mean, if you're just some person in Ohio and you see, get into a defensive incident on the street, you're probably not going to get that benefit of the doubt into your reasonableness analysis.
But we hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti 2A algorithm by sharing this video.
And if you're interested in a more detailed breakdown of the facts of this George Allen Kelly murder case, you can check out our previous video on the matter here. And until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.